Welcome to the Illinois PTA video series PTA Essentials, a series of brief videos that cover the basics of running a PTA unit. This PTA Essential video covers safely handling PTA funds. We will begin with how to handle money your PTA collects at events such as a school registration, carnival, silent auction, or any other time money is collected by your PTA. When collecting PTA funds, you always want to have two independent people count the money. Spouses or couples are not independent, and when it comes to PTA funds, should not be considered two separate people, whether it is counting money or providing two signatures on a check. You want to be sure to use a deposit voucher when counting money and making a deposit. Be sure to have the treasurer verify the amount collected with the counters, and deposit the money as soon as possible. You also want to be sure not to use cash from an event to reimburse expenses. This can distort the amount of money the event brings in, as well as the amount spent. It can also make it more difficult to determine your PTA's gross income, the total amount of money your PTA collects during its fiscal year, which is needed when filling your PTA's 990 form with the IRS. Let's take a look at how this process works with a deposit voucher. Here we have a sample deposit voucher. You can find a similar version on the Illinois PTA website at illinoispta.org in the Treasurer's Materials under the Leadership Resources menu item, or in the Illinois PTA local unit packet that was sent to your PTA president at the beginning of the school year. When using a deposit voucher, your two money counters will fill out the date and the event or budget line that the income will be counted towards. When the two counters have agreed on the amount of money collected, they will fill out the top portion of the deposit voucher, indicating the amount of money collected as coins, cash, checks, and the total amount collected. The counters then duplicate that information on the bottom half of the deposit voucher and sign their names to both halves of the voucher. At least one of the counters then takes the money collected and the deposit voucher to the PTA treasurer. The treasurer will count the money and verify the amount before the original counter or counters leave, and sign off on both halves of the deposit voucher. The voucher is then cut in half, with one half going with one of the counters and the other half going with the treasurer. By separating the voucher, the PTA maintains a paper trail of the actual amount of money collected. One of the most common ways that PTA funds are stolen is by someone pocketing some of the cash collected at an event rather than depositing it. This is why, when making deposits, you should always use a deposit voucher. Once the treasurer has signed off on the deposit voucher, they should deposit the money at the PTA's bank as soon as possible. As a treasurer, you do not want to be responsible for hundreds or thousands of dollars of not your money any longer than necessary. Most banks will provide a night deposit envelope for free that will allow the treasurer to drop money off at the bank after hours. After the deposit is made, the treasurer should record the amount of the deposit in the PTA ledger by its budget line and in the PTA check register as well. The treasurer should then staple the deposit receipt to the back of the deposit voucher and file the deposit voucher for the monthly treasurer report and the PTA audit. This covers the basics of handling the money that your PTA receives. Now let's look at the expense side of the PTA ledger. Like Illinois PTA's recommendation on handling income, our recommended practices for spending funds provide a PTA with a paper trail of where money is spent and provide some checks and balances to help avoid the theft of funds. When spending PTA money, your PTA should reimburse by check only. When a PTA reimburses someone from the cash collected at an event, it becomes very difficult to accurately track the actual income and expenses from the event or the PTA's gross income for the year. In addition, the Illinois PTA has seen that units that have an ATM, debit, or credit card in the PTA's name are more often subject to theft through the misuse of those cards. For that reason, we do not recommend that PTAs have a PTA ATM, debit, or credit card. You should always have two signatures on every check. Even if your bank does not require them or offer an account that has such a requirement, your PTA can still require two signatures on every check issued. As mentioned earlier when counting money, these two signatures should be independent from each other as well. Your PTA can have more than 2 people authorized to sign checks on your PTA account. That way, checks can be written even if one signatory is unavailable, or if a check is being made out to one of the signatories on the account, others who are signatories can be the ones to sign that check. If your PTA has bonding insurance, you are likely required to have a non-signatory to the checking account take a look at each monthly bank statement and sign off on it. By requiring 2 signatures on every check, it is easy for that person to scan the check images on the bank statement and ensure that each one has 2 signatures. A check with only 1 signature becomes a warning sign that PTA funds might have been misused. The PTA treasurer should only write a check once an expense voucher has been filled out. We will cover how to do this in more detail in just a minute. Most PTAs do not reimburse sales tax. The Illinois PTA provides each unit in good standing with a sales tax exemption letter from the Illinois Department of Revenue, so purchases on behalf of the PTA should not be charged sales tax. Make sure that those making PTA purchases know that they should use the sales tax exemption letter and that it is to be used only for PTA purchases. The treasurer should record each expense according to its budget line. This information should be on the expense voucher and helps the PTA plan future budgets by providing an accurate accounting of how PTA funds were spent. Now let's look at how to use a PTA expense voucher. The sample voucher you see here is similar to those you can find in the treasurer's materials on the Illinois PTA website or in the local unit packet. An expense voucher is filled out anytime a check needs to be written by the PTA, whether it is to reimburse a person for purchases already made or to make a PTA purchase from a business that has provided a purchase order or invoice. To fill out the expense voucher, the person making the request provides the date of the request, the amount the check should be made out for, and who the check should be made payable to. They then record the budget line or budget lines that the expense belong to, and itemize the expenditures that have been made. Receipts, invoices, or purchase orders should be attached to the back of the expense voucher. They then sign off on the expense voucher and have the event chairman or a PTA officer sign off to approve the expense. They should indicate who the check is to be returned to, and if the check is to be mailed, provide the address. Once all of the information on the expense voucher has been provided, along with receipts, invoices, or purchase orders, the treasurer records the check number and the date the check was written on the voucher. They also record the expense in the check register and in the PTA ledger according to the proper budget line. The expense voucher is then filed away for the treasurer's report and the PTA audit. Now let's review what we have covered. Always have 2 independent people count money. Deposit funds as soon as possible. As treasurer, you are personally responsible for those funds until they have been deposited. Always use deposit and expense vouchers. These provide your PTA with a paper trail of the money coming into and going out of your PTA. Don't use cash for reimbursement. Always reimburse by check. Require 2 independent signatures on every check. Record both deposits and expenses against their budget lines. Deposit and expense vouchers make this much easier for your PTA treasurer. Thank you for watching this Illinois PTA video. You can find additional information on the Illinois PTA website at illinoispta.org and on our blog, One Voice, Illinois.